Hey all, here are OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the Anker Soundcore series Liberty 2 Pros. These are TWS wireless buds, which sells for a little under $130, so they're definitely more of an expensive premium pair, and they're the flagship for Anker, which is a company that's more well known for making power banks, and they are pretty popular on Amazon. The Liberty 2 Pros packs a pretty interesting list of features, including a companion app that has a hearing test function that can customize the sound profile, basically making a custom EQ just for you. It also uses pretty fancy drivers that are made from Knowles. Usually this is found in IEMs or in-ear monitors that are more audiophile grade, but essentially all you need to know is that it's using dual drivers from Knowles, one balanced armature and one dynamic driver. These also have Qi wireless charging, so you can pop them onto a Qi charging mat to get quickly topped up. With the battery case, they will last for up to 32 hours, and individually the buds themselves can last 8 hours alone. Plastic has a bold statement that says, "Join the audio revolution." Then inside here we have just the case itself. We have already kind of popped the buds themselves in here for charging, but this is what it looks like. Now underneath here we have a quick start guide. This is a quick user manual as well that goes into more detail of how to set it up. Then we've got a USB Type-C charging cable if you don't want to use wireless charging, and a very impressive array of spare tips and wings to get a very secure lock. So this is a great design that will definitely be snug and prevent these from falling out, even if you're performing vigorous sports. All the tips though are made out of silicone, so there are no kind of memory foam options provided out of the box. So taking a closer look at the battery case's design, it's constructed out of this soft touch rubber material that makes it feel very grippy, and it is surprisingly lightweight. It is a touch larger than, say, the Apple AirPod case, as you can see here by contrast, although we also get longer battery life, again around 20-something hours versus 30-something hours. And here it is next to much cheaper Redmi AirDots, which are also smaller, but these are still about the same in terms of thickness to slide into a pocket. The interesting thing here is the door of this battery case slides open. This is a very dramatic and kind of artistic design, I think. The mechanism here feels quite firm. It isn't spring assisted, so it can kind of stop in between, but once you push it open, it locks in and clicks. And on the rear here, it displays some basic information. The case here is still constructed out of plastic, and a rubber flap covers up the Type-C charging port. So this is a nice extra protection. It keeps the battery case also to be slightly water resistant and dust proof. There's also a key that you can tap on to quickly see how much battery life is left in the case. Anyways, whenever you pop open the door, it also automatically wakes the buds and they will begin pairing with your phone. Because of the larger winged style, they are sitting actually in an interesting orientation, kind of sideways if you think about it, whereas the majority of buds are sitting completely flat in terms of downwards. So it has an interesting positioning, but luckily the magnets are very strong, so even though it has this kind of odd placement, it still can click in with a satisfying thump, so they can automatically align and begin charging. Now if we remove the buds here and take a closer look at their design, it is very distinctive. Has the kind of Anker Soundcore logo on the front. The front area here, by the way, is not touch sensitive. In fact, there is a small button on the top that you can tap on to control things like play and pause your music, skip tracks, and the application also allows you to customize this key. So you can reprogram it to adjust the volume, for example, raising it higher or lower. So it's great to see that customization and the ability to control that directly on these. Although this is a physical button, and I always say I prefer touch-sensitive keys on smaller buds because they require less pressure to activate, I think the placement on the top here is actually still decent because when you're pressing down, it doesn't exert as much pressure into your ears. Now, along this curved lip is also an embedded LED status light, as you can see there, which can glow different colors, including red and blue, when it tells you it's pairing, so it's a very clever design. The body is otherwise constructed out of a soft touch rubber material that feels pretty grippy and resistant to sweat. And we see the cover for the drivers, which is made out of this interesting copper color, has this flower pattern to it, which is pretty interesting. And otherwise, you can see they kind of have an ergonomic tilt inwards that fits very snugly into my ears, at least. They were never really at odds of falling out. The size of these are definitely a little on the larger side. They're never too bulky or heavy just because they are very well supported in terms of weight thanks to the wings that catches onto the side of your ears when you're wearing them, but they definitely aren't the smallest in terms of the absolute dimensions. Let's take a closer look at the companion application, which is called Soundcore. After which point we can take a look at the battery life remaining on the left and right sides by tapping on these little indicators, although it doesn't give us a numeric number such as 90 or 80% remaining. I can tap the three dots on the side here to take a look at if there's any firmware updates, and I have already received one firmware update since taking these out of the box, and they can be pushed over, which is nice to see. Otherwise, we can also take a look at the controller on the side here, which is the interface that you use for adjusting the key, which is, again, you can double tap or hold for 1 second to do things like access the voice assistant, to change the volume, to skip tracks. You can customize all of these shortcuts, which is pretty handy and works really quite well. Finally, I can tap on the equalizer button on the side here to change the EQ. Right now I'm using the custom HearID, which is my personalized sound that I can turn on or off at the flick of a button. And the HearID function here in terms of the customized sound is not just a gimmick. Surprisingly, I could hear an audible difference when the mode is activated versus when it's not. Essentially, when you are performing a test, what it does is it plays a series of sounds on the left side and then also on the right side of the buds, and then they increase and fluctuate in terms of frequency and range and volume, and it prompts you to click a button if you're able to hear the sound versus release if you are no longer able to hear it. So essentially it maps out where some of your blind zones in terms of hearing are, perhaps when your hearing is decaying a little bit, and it then compensates in terms of adjusting to make those regions sound louder, or perhaps adjusting those regions to be more impactful on other closer regions that you are able to hear. So it makes those adjustments, and the result is a listening experience that's a bit more crisp and bright. Just everything feels like it's been boosted up a level, even though the technical volume still remains the same. When I found the function turn on versus off, the bass just sounded a bit more punchy, a bit more rich and crisp. Everything just sounded a bit more energetic and lively. So I found that this is a good mode that I often just turn on. Now there's also other kind of custom equalizers that you can set yourself, and then the ones below are the default equalizers, including the Soundcore Signature, which is the one that's been automatically tuned by the Grammy artists, which is the one that they recommend. It's also a very good one to just typically use, but there's also ones for acoustic, bass boosted, bass reduced, classical, dance, deep, electronic, flat, hip-hop, jazz, Latin, lounge, piano, pop, R&B, rock, small speakers, spoken word, treble booster, treble reducer, and vocal booster. So it provides a rich range of scenarios and different audio sources that you may want to listen to. For example, spoken word might be podcasts, and that will try and make the mids, make voices become more prominent. Moving into the pure audio quality, such as the drivers, the Bluetooth chip, unsurprisingly, everything works very well. It is using Qualcomm's aptX chip, so latency is fairly low, so you can play back a video, for example, such as from Netflix or from YouTube, and the audio and video are typically synced together without too many issues. Otherwise, the sound quality itself is surprisingly rich and surprisingly dynamic in the sense that it definitely feels like you're wearing larger headphones and just tiny little mini buds. I think part of the reason is because of that dual driver setup. In terms of the aforementioned bass, they do get quite punchy, especially if you listen to a bass boosted track, and perhaps if you're choosing on the EQ app the bass boosted mode, they get very thumpy and quite satisfying if you are a bass head. If you're using it in the acoustic mode or some of the other EQ modes, it becomes more tightly controlled so it doesn't overpower the mids or trebles. So it is actually very impressive in terms of the lower frequency. Mids and trebles, by the way, also do sound quite clean. I would say treble in particular don't sound too harsh or shrill. Even as you turn up the volume, it still sounds comfortable. Same thing goes with mids. I would say vocals in particular, upper mids is where it sounds quite good. So the Knowles drivers are definitely adding a layer of detail to the sound that otherwise would be difficult to achieve. Now, the only slight con that I found was they're not completely 100% clean. If you strain your ears and listen really closely, you can still occasionally hear a very faint hum or white noise or hiss in the background. It's not too disturbing. I wouldn't say it's really a deal breaker, but that also prevents me from saying that these are absolutely audiophile grade, because they're not 100% completely silent. The other thing to keep in mind is that although these are expensive headphones and you have access to a companion app, they are lacking some additional features like the audio transparency mode, for example, which MIFO's TWS headphones typically have, and there's also no active noise cancellation. So if you want to kind of hear what's going on around you, you do have to remove these from your ears because of how snug fitting they are. They're super noise isolating. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Anker Soundcore series Liberty 2 Pros. Overall, I think that for the price, they are very good in terms of the pure audio quality because of the Knowles drivers that they've used, and more importantly, because of that companion application, which is a nice touch that I haven't seen too much of in the previous buds that I've reviewed. The design is pretty elegant and also resistant to sweat. It's very tight in terms of the seal and fit, so they're comfortable even for sports. That said, it doesn't have audio transparency or ANC, but aside from that, again, the quality itself of the sound is definitely worth your consideration. You can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the Anker Liberty 2 Pro True Wireless Buds.